Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another Meetup Live. My name is Alex. I am joined here today by my colleague, Colin-Pierre. Today, we're also joined by a couple of Meetup organizers who are going to talk to us about venues. Paul Rock and Michelle Perchuk. They're going to share with us some trusted tips on choosing the right setting for your next event, whether it's online or in person. We're going to go through all the relevant considerations for finding a venue, and that's going to set the right tone for your gatherings and make your attendees want to come back and continue being part of your groups. As always, we like to spend some time at the top of our event here sharing with you the guidelines so you know what to expect. First of all, this video will be recorded. You do not appear in the video. The only faces you'll be seeing are myself, my co-host, and our panelists. You've also been courtesy muted, so the only audio you will be hearing are those of us presenting today. If you do have questions, we'd love that. There's a Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to submit your questions. We have some community support specialists on the line ready to answer your questions. And we usually try to take some time at the end of our event to answer some questions directly. Last but not least, closed captioning is available. If you'd like to turn that on, just click the live transcription icon at the bottom of your screen and then select your preference. Today, we will be talking about finding and securing your venues, and that's going to take up the majority of our time today after I get done with the introduction. We will make some time for Q&A, and then as always, we also have some resources and links that we like to share with you so that you can access our community support team, that you can find answers to your questions if we don't address them today in our event. We'll be talking about tactics for protecting your virtual events, because virtual events are now a healthy part of our platform, as well as the in-person events. We want to make sure those venues feel as accessible to you. We'll also talk about how to select a suitable venue for your in-person events. And we'll talk about strategies to prepare so that you can encourage attendance and show-ups to your events. And as I said before, we do have two Meetup organizers with us to share their tips and tricks with us. I'll introduce you to them now. First, we have Paul Rock. Paul is currently the organizer of the New York Tech Creatives and Business Professionals Happy Hour. A virtual reality evangelist since 2014, he has served as the president of the Toronto chapter of the Virtual Reality and Augmented Reality Association, the VRARA. In addition to co-founding a virtual reality arcade business, as a passion project, he currently produces the Burning Man-inspired theatrical show in NYC, Electric Circus. For questions about organizing a meetup or partnering with his meetup, he can be reached at some links that Emily is going to be sharing in our chat here. Our other guest today is Michelle Perchuk. Michelle is an award-winning author and career coach. As the founder of MTV Coaching and a professor of professional life at Fairleigh Dickinson University, she empowers young leaders through financial literacy and prepares them for the transition from academic to professional life. She has been instrumental in developing and recruiting talent for companies like Bank of America, Google, Meta, and Amazon, and has impacted over 5,000 lives by coaching professionals to achieve their career aspirations. She's also authored a book on the evolution of recruiting called Swimming in the Talent Pool, and she has written many articles for Forbes magazine. And she now hosts her own bi-weekly Meetup event. So if you're interested in growing your community on Meetup, you can reach out to Michelle at the links that we'll be providing as well. Great. So thank you both so much for joining us today. Really excited to talk about venues. We've known for a long time that this is a topic that a lot of organizers, whether they're seasoned and they've been doing this for a long time, or whether they are brand new, figuring out where to meet has always been a really crucial question for us. And it's part of why we had that partnership with WeWork years ago, which no longer in play. But the thought behind it was a partnership with a company that offers venues was going to be so useful for us. We know this is like a really crucial part of community building, is finding the right place. Before we dive into the strategies and specifics about venues, I'm going to hand the presentation over to Colin. And Colin is going to show us some technical tips about navigating the event scheduler in terms of the tools that we offer for selecting venues and setting them up for your events. So Colin?
Cool. Thanks, Alex. Hello, everyone. All right, I'm going to take over screen share, and I'm going to show you how, just like so we're on the same page about, from an organizer perspective, how you can set your event's location. So you're here on your homepage. I'm just going to go right here to create event. I have a virtual yoga for beginners group where we do yoga together over Zoom. And it's an online group. So when you go to create an event, you input all your details, but down here is where you can select your location. So we offer online events and in-person events, but for the online event, if you're hosting an online event, you check the make this an online event box, and then you can input any URL that links to your online event. So whether you're using Zoom or Google Meets or Google Teams, whatever, any sort of video conferencing platform you can add there. We also have this connect to Zoom button. So if you have a Zoom account, you can connect your Zoom account to your Meetup account so that when you create an event, it automatically generates a Zoom link so that you don't have to like go into Zoom separately and copy and paste. It'll just automatically populate that if you want. So that's how to do online events. And then here is where you input your in-person events. So if I were to just put in, like, we're going to meet at the MoMA Metropolitan Museum of Art, you start typing it in. And then once you select it, you'll see the map pin here. If you click the map pin, it will open Google Maps just to make sure you're at the right location. You can also edit the map pin, and this is really helpful, especially for hiking groups or places that don't necessarily have like an exact Google location. So maybe you can drag it, to the stairs in front and save it. And then also the how to find us section is really useful because when you show up at the MoMA, where are you going to meet? So you can see meet in front like on the front staircase. And then also like call me if you can't find us. So that's helpful because you really just want to stay in communication with your members, especially for in-person events, because people, sometimes can't find you. And then the last thing here is COVID-19 safety measures. This is totally optional. You can say whether the venue will be indoor, outdoor, if masks are required, or if the vaccination is required. So yeah. And then just one other thing, if you start typing in Metro and like maybe you can't find the location, you can add a new location here. And you can make it so that it's like a private home address or anything. So just wanted to share that as well. So yeah, that's little demo on, locations. I'm gonna jump over here to our presentation again. And we just talked about hosting online events, but I want to talk about disruptive attendees because we do hear with online events, unfortunately, that there are Zoom bombers that come, which is a huge disruption to your events, and I've experienced it myself, unfortunately. So I wanted to just come in and share that we definitely encourage managing your membership. If there are disruptive attendees or members causing trouble, you are totally empowered to remove them from your group. You can, I'll show you real quick. You can remove them, you can ban them, and you can also vet them so you can edit in your group settings. So I'm just going to go back here and just show you what I'm talking about. So here, if I'm going to my group, you can go over to your member list. And if you see that someone is, clearly like causing trouble or Zoom bombing or whatever, you go over here, you can search for them or find them, click remove, and then you can just remove them or ban them by checking this box. One last thing before I hand it back over to Alex is around setting your group's privacy settings for new members. And you do that by clicking manage group, click edit group settings, and then you click new member settings. And from here, you have a bunch of options where if someone wants to join your group, you can require approval before they can actually see your online event link. I found this to be really helpful because if someone just randomly joins my group and then RSVPs to my event, I don't know if this is a real person or if this is just someone who's trying to cause trouble. So I have require approval for new members turned on so that when they join, they will be put into a pending members list. and then I can manually approve or deny them. And as I'm deciding to approve or deny them, I require a photo, I require them to answer a profile question, just so that you can make sure that this is a real person who's actually serious about your group. So I ask, like, how did you find or hear about this group? And this question has helped me kind of vet people, because some people answer suspiciously or don't even answer or answer gibberish. And so this is just a good extra barrier for them.
And Colin, how many members does your group currently have?
My group has, I think, around 500 or so. Let's see. Yeah, like 567. So there's a
And the
lot
reason
of
I'm
people.
asking is you've set these barriers in place to protect your group, but it hasn't affected the growth of your group. Like,
Yeah, not at all.
People joining. Yeah.
Exactly. It really hasn't. It's just made it more safe, in my opinion. And made me feel more confident and less like paranoid about people joining my event and bombarding it, which has definitely happened. So yeah, I just wanted to share those little tips about attendees and vetting members before they can join. Alex, feel free to take back over and jump into Zoom safety, because this is another big part that has really helped me with
Absolutely.
online events.
Yeah, so we do have, as Colin showed in the event scheduler, this partnership with Zoom so that you can automatically populate a Zoom link into the event scheduler for your online events. Zoom has its own set of safety and security features that you can manage separate from the ones that we offer on Meetup. And I believe Emily's sharing a link to Zoom's help center that can sort of walk you through some of those. The screenshot we've got here shows you what some of those options are in Zoom for when you're hosting your events. You can also remove attendees directly in Zoom while an event is happening if necessary. Some options that I like to keep in mind about those online events are not just setting a passcode for the event itself, but being very careful about how you share the password for your online event to really make sure that the only people attending are in good faith. They're people that you know. You can share that password either in a direct message or an event chat. We'll talk more about the contact tools that you can use to share these details later on. You can also decide if there are any settings you want to turn off, because often there are options automatically by default in Zoom about screen sharing, about whether or not your attendees will be able to speak up and people will be able to hear them. So being selective about what settings you have turned on or off can make sure that your event kind of goes off without a hitch. Now, unfortunately, as Colin said, we are aware, and some of us have experienced, that there are still people who slip through the cracks and try to disrupt your event. We really, really strongly recommend and encourage and request that you report when this happens. Our trust and safety team reviews every report, we investigate, and we take actions in order to make sure that Meetup remains safe for everybody to continue meeting. We do have a quick article I can share about how to report inappropriate content. This article tells you how to report both comments, messages, and then even just members. If there's a member who's acting suspiciously in your group, we want you to feel empowered to report that so we can continue investigating it for you.
Paul and Michelle, do you have any tips and tricks about how to help with these online event safety measures? I tried my own things, but I'm just curious if you have any other thoughts or strategies that you might share.
I mean, for me, I say it's just use your, kind of sense if someone's disruptive. You don't have to give us about good amount of reasons why. Just remove them. If you don't want them in, just remove them. Don't give it thought.
Well, I had an instance where I had requested a profile picture as part of the new member setting. And obviously, I also use the utility of the questions. Since I'm a career coach, I really want to make sure that people who are joining my group are concerned about their career and not about something else. And I did have a situation where a person, instead of a profile photo, posted a photo of their CBD special deal. And I notified Meetup right away. I removed them, but then what they did is they were on to me and they tried to rejoin again. And at that point, I blocked them.
And there is
But-
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Michelle.
But I also had somebody infiltrate my virtual group where, my members started saying that this person was a troll. And I blocked them right away in the Zoom call, but I couldn't find them as a member. So they must have dropped in through another formula. I'm really not sure how that happened, but I'm well versed in Zoom, so I was able to, remove them from the group almost immediately.
I think that speaks to what we were saying in the previous slide about trying to restrict who has access to the actual Zoom link itself until the event is happening. And obviously, if somebody gets access to the event and RSVPs, no one's going to be able to stop them from logging in under a different name. But it's always worth reporting when that happens, because our trust and safety team can investigate. Oftentimes we can locate the account itself and take action. I also want to call out, Colin showed in the member list, you can remove a member from a group, but removing them isn't a permanent action. The member can rejoin. And if you know that this person is a disruptive influence, you don't want to deal with them anymore. Like Paul said, you are empowered to be unforgiving, because it's for the safety of your group. So the extra step to take would be not just to block them, but not just to remove them, but to ban them. And ban them prevents them from rejoining your group.
Yeah, and also another thing is that with these online events, I mean, people don't take them that seriously. Even if they rejoin, they post. I wouldn't let it get so angry. No one takes what they post seriously. It's so easy to remove them. And I think it's more annoying about those who are disruptive at in-person events, because that's where they can be very annoying. Like, people complain about the fee, you know what I mean? When you're very obvious about it. Or I've even had hecklers seen hecklers at a moderated speaker event. That's where I think is the real problem. But I guess I would say set the rules. I've learned to set rules that only questions until the end of the event. This way you don't have no one can heckle when you're trying to have a speaker event, because no matter what they say, and make sure that if you're moderating, there's no Q&A till the end. This way you could the heckler could just say next question.
I think that's a good point, Paul, that a lot of this is about rule setting and expectation setting before the event itself. That's been a common theme in these Meetup 101 events that we've hosted. And we've talked about how that applies in terms for online events. Let's move on now, and we'll talk about how to plan for in-person events. I want to thank Michelle for sharing this framework for us, this acronym for PLAN. It's, I think, a really useful 4-step way about thinking about in-person venues, how to select them, how to secure them, the information you need beforehand, and how to communicate it to people. So we'll take this next section one slide at a time. We'll go through each part of this process, and we start with passion and how passion informs your venue selection. I mean, we're on Meetup for one primary reason, and it's that we're looking for people who share an interest, who share a common goal. That's how these groups come together in the first place. So the first thing to keep in mind is, when you're selecting an in-person venue, does it actually align with the goals that you're searching for? Michelle, Paul, do either of you have thoughts or experiences around this stage of the venue selection and how it aligns with the goals for your group that you want to share?
For me specifically, when I did start hosting in person, I wanted it to be a place that had, the privacy that we would need, and also a place that would be very quiet, literally the hours that my members would want to attend. So most of my members want to attend my event after work because they're working and they want to be better at what they do. They need help with their resume. So they would have to join me after work in person. So I was very cognizant of that when I selected a venue. Also, people in this population get together and talk over tea and coffee, just quickly, half an hour, 45 minutes. So I actually use that to dictate, because I get together with people for coffee and tea all the time. So I approached a local cute coffee shop that would allow me to do this. So it's like, let's have some coffee or tea and talk about, your career. So I had used that as something that would drive my venue selection.
And it was a venue that you were already familiar with, right, Michelle?
Yes.
What steps do you think you would have taken differently if you weren't aware of like a coffee shop that would have been suitable for your purposes? Like, how do you go about starting to hunt for those spaces?
Well, I knew, I kind of had a visual of what I wanted my event to look like. I visualized it, what would make people feel comfortable and what would bring people together. And I envisioned myself kind of sitting at a table with some kind of a beverage, talking to people and kind of sharing my expertise. So I almost had this salon kind of feel in my mind when I actually founded this group. And if I didn't choose this particular coffee shop, I had 2 or 3 other ones that I had in mind that had the look that I wanted. It was modern and it had the drinks that people would be enjoying. It wasn't like a rundown diner or something like that. So I literally, the way to answer this question and to really help people with venue selection, try to visualize what you want your event to look like what does your dream event look like, and then kind of back into what options you have available in your area.
And Paul, your group has very different needs for the kind of events that you get together for. So what goes into your process for selecting venues?
Well, and that's a very good question. I mean, I do co-organize a group, for example, for Unity, which is for game developers, right? And that's where we do need a speaker, but majority of people who attend, they want a speaker, but they really want to go there to network. So I made sure that I picked the place that would have a dedicated area that would want us to be there if people could buy drinks, because if networking people do expect to be able to buy drinks, but they're not expecting anything like a rooftop or anything like that. They just want somewhere to mingle. But I said that we would just dedicate a certain area for the presentation part, and then afterwards people could buy drinks. But I also made sure that this would not be during a venue hours where the venue might be busy. I had to make sure the venue would be comfortable because I didn't want it to be like an interruption for them. So, don't ever pick, if you're having an event, don't pick a sports bar, for example, to host a networking event when it's a game night, because they don't need you. Make sure that the venue really does need you, where they can provide you the proper accommodation.
That's a really great point. I think it leads really well into our next slide here about the specific details. I think thinking about, as you're saying, the different stages that an event might have and finding a venue that suits each one, and keeping in mind the expectations that your attendees are going to have for the kind of events that you're hosting. This is where the little specific details really start coming to play. So the second step of this, after you think about the passion that unites your attendees for this event, think about learning the details that everyone needs to know before they arrive. I myself, as someone who will attend meetup events, sometimes, even as an employee, it's a make or break moment if I don't know where I'm going to park. The anxiety about I don't know the situation where I'm going to end up. Is it worth circling around in that stress to attend a new event that night? So a lot of those kind of details, not only where you can park, but the directions, how to get there. Paul, you spoke, and Michelle, you both spoke to with the kind of events that you're hosting, people are expecting to get drinks or expecting to get coffee. So are those resources already available here? Let's talk a little bit about convenience. Do either of you have thoughts about selecting a convenient location for your attendees?
Well, yeah. The first thing is Well, I mean, LA and New York, we have, two different things, For New York, we have to find out a place where there's a train station, right? If it's near a local train station and in a safe area or an area that people normally will frequent. So if you you don't want to pick an area that's known for being sketchy for some people.
Right.
But when you're in LA, I remember when I was in LA, it's like you have to think about where you meet up, what part of town, because it's traffic, and parking. You got to make sure adequate parking, but also, where's your demographic located? How long will it take for them to get there? Because like if you're just going to have a casual event meetup, like a 2-hour meetup, then people won't drive half an hour where it might be an hour. But if you're going to have something much bigger, then maybe you could have it in a more inconvenient location.
That's a great point too, Paul, about the timing of it. Like not just the length of time of the event itself, but when you schedule the event. Because Michelle, you were just saying your event had to take place after work hours because these were people who were seeking professional career support. So how does that factor into convenience when you are selecting your venues?
I went to the manager of the venue and I actually asked them what is their most quiet time, what time they close. Is there any noise? They were concerned about the big juice maker that they have there, and they were concerned that it would actually make noise and interfere with my meeting. And I went and I tested it and it did not. The place that I selected had great exposure, huge windows. So people, as they were coming up, they actually would see me sitting there. They could park in front of it. There was also a parking lot in the back. And it's just an overall great place, but it was not very central to like where people are. So I think that the next in-person event that I'm going to have is going to be, let's say, like in a mini strip mall. Or in a much more accessible area where there is public transportation, or people can jump in an Uber and literally be 2 minutes away.
I really like the idea of testing the venue before the event. Like obviously that requires a little bit more of a time commitment for preparation, but it's good to like, as the slide is saying, to know those specific details as you're entering a space, to know for sure, like, is there going to be a sound issue? And is there going to be a parking issue? That's great. I think also in terms of like you're saying about like accessibility of location, whether it's going to be in a mini strip mall location, or if it's going to be off of a train stop, but maybe a few blocks away from there. I just want to call out again something that Colin had showed us with the event scheduler, that how to find us section and how important that can be for those in-person locations. If it's the museum's a great example of this, as is hiking. Like Colin was saying, it's a big space. You don't necessarily know if you're going to host something in a big space where you're going to find people. I've heard from other organizers too who say that they use this how to find us space to identify, like, I will be wearing this, and that's how you can identify our group. Or I will have like a balloon, and that's how you will, yeah. So there's like little signals that you can use to communicate with people about accessibility of location as well.
Oh, and yeah, and if you have a good accommodating venue, sometimes they'll put signs too. You ask the venue if you'd be willing to put signs to let people know, like, we're at a hotel. My meetup tomorrow, they're going to put signs in the lobby. It's a small hotel, so they know to go to the rooftop. I don't have to tell people to go to the rooftop, or the people at the counter know. And if the place says they won't put signs, that you have to do it yourself, that means they're not a good venue, even if they say they will host.
I love hearing about this experience that you're both sharing about actually talking to the venue managers about what to expect, because frankly it's something that I hadn't thought of before. I think this next slide is showing, like, it's we're going to talk about acknowledging the needs of your attendees, which we've talked about before, about what they expect when they arrive, but also the needs of your venue, and being able to communicate to the venue how many people are going to arrive, what they're going to be doing, how it benefits the venue. Can really, it sounds like, from what I'm hearing from both of you, facilitate a much easier and more relaxing event because you're less stressed about those pieces of the puzzle. Paul, you mentioned an idea that I wanted to follow up with you about how you pitch your meetup event to a venue. Do you want to speak to that a little?
Well, yeah, I mean, I always think about the value it bring, to the venue. Well, I mean, there's a concept in business called WIFM, for what's in it for me. And if you're going to have a venue, if you're gonna have 10 people, right, and you're gonna pitch a venue, don't ask them to do something huge or crazy. But like Michelle mentioned about non-busy hours, they need customers. To say we could bring a lot of customers during this dead night of the week. What days are you normally not? I ask them when they're usually not busy, so this way I can recommend a date that where I know they would want me. But then I've seen private offices, like for example, the tech meetups, that a lot of times they just want to reach developers to come to their office to know about them because they want to hire. So that's why they would do it, maybe offer. It's like you got to think about what's the value for the business, but don't take it like a cookie cutter approach. Each venue, whether it be a bar, restaurant, or business, you got to think about the value it brings by hosting your meetup there. Because then sometimes like you could have a meetup where you can bring a lot of people, but they bring in no customers. They don't care. That there's no value. You got to think about the value it brings for the venue.
I think there's a really clever piece of this that we're talking about here, which is you have to think about, as an organizer, the value that your event offers both to the venue and to the attendees. And I think that's, it's not something that I think is immediately obvious as you start a meetup group, but I think it's something that does really add some benefits. Is there anything that you want to add to this, Michelle, about your experience with working with venues to acknowledge the needs on both sides of that event?
Well, the people that attended my in-person actually thanked me for introducing them to such a cute new place, which is like all organic. And they actually, as I left, because my meetup is only 1 hour, they actually wind up staying and like getting their card like for membership, and they wind up staying and eating there. So that was a very big plus to the owner, where he was happy that he was able to make some sales, and they also took some stuff to go, where those were the dead hours of his business, because he's a big breakfast and lunch place.
I also, that's I love hearing stories about people who then like are hanging out after the event is over, because we talk a lot internally at Meetup about like that's where the real magic happens, because you never know what connections you're going to make and how those communities build. The event sort of like it's the central moment where those connections can happen, but I think the time immediately after the event is where those connections can really start flourishing, which leads us
in the parking lot.
Yeah, the parking lot after the event. So, and I think that leads us really nicely into the last piece of this PLAN acronym, which is networking should be easy for everyone. And how can we make it easier? How can we facilitate that parking lot after the event moment?
By the way, can I mention another point though?
Yeah, of course.
I do want to mention, but also don't assume that the person's automatically going to see value in what you're bringing. Not every venue sees value that you're bringing customers or you're advertising your business. Sometimes some venues, they feel it's overwhelming. So never assume the value you bring. You always got to make sure that they see the value. And sometimes people don't even see value and have, the work that you put in to do the meetup. So that's one thing. Just don't assume that, oh, I'm just going to have it here because he's going to see value. I'm a customer. Don't. I've seen organizers do that. Just assume. They don't have to ask venues questions. I would never assume, but there was a question I saw in the Q&A about theater for someone that was asking about theater, but with venue owners, I wanted to mention that it's also important for the venue owner to also treat the organizers or whether theater performers with, the way they would want to be treated, because then, That's how a good relationship's maintained.
I
know.
think, yeah.
And they're not employees. Meetup organizers are not employees to the bar, and the bar is not employees to you. Make sure, sometimes I've seen people get into that position where it creates bad chemistry.
So what, like, then working off of this last piece of it here about making that part, making the networking part easier. What do you do, Paul, if this venue doesn't see the value? Like, how do you make it easier for them to see the value? How do you make it easier for the attendees to attend? Is it as simple as what you're saying about member lists, where it's like, well, if they don't get it, we have to find a different venue, we don't need to deal with it? Or is there some other strategies that help you sort of smooth that process out for everybody?
Well, I say, for me, I don't like to come up, I don't like to prioritize answers and assumptions. I like to prioritize questions. So I like to ask people questions about what they're looking for. So I've seen, for example, someone told me that they had a venue where they brought in a lot of money with drink sales, but they were not happy venue because the bartenders didn't like people didn't tip enough, and or it became more stress. You got to ask the venues or and you got to ask the questions. But sometimes there are people who are just they're just lazy, careless. You could tell that. If they're like that, then they don't. Then you just got to make sure when you're there to make sure things go smooth. That's the main thing when it's happening. And that's not really hard, you know what I mean? It's just be polite and that's it. But there's some venues that they just don't care because either they deal, sometimes they have corporate clients, or they're just, you can't really jam a square peg into a round hole,
And how about you, Michelle? What are the steps that you take in order to smooth out this process and make it easier for venue managers or for your attendees?
Well, I was actually introduced by a friend who's very well networked in my geographical area. And I asked him, who do you think may be open to something like this? And I was recommended to this owner of Mood Food, who said, let's talk. So we spoke on the phone. And I tested out the venue. I wanted to make sure that the noise would not be a problem, and that it was literally, we were the only ones in there with my meetup. So everything went well, but I probably will not use that place again because it was kind of a neighborhood place, and it's not in like a mecca of people where I have to look at a different neighborhood. I have to look in Edgewater, New Jersey now next, but
it seemed like it's the convenience factor.
yeah, but the most convenient thing for me to do is actually doing a virtual, and then maybe every quarter bringing out like a mega event and bringing people. And I actually got a great idea about a museum or a Central Park walk where we're walking and talking career, which I think this is a huge takeaway for me from this meeting. I got a brilliant idea.
Oh, that's great to hear. Cool. All right. Well, thank you both so much for sharing your thoughts about the planning for selecting the venues. A lot of really great tips we came up here. Let's say you're planning your next event. You've done all this research, you know all these details that you need to communicate with your members. You've spoken to the venue managers. I'm going to hand off to Colin now, and he's going to take us quickly through the various communication tools that we like to emphasize and how they specifically help with communicating about venues itself with your attendees before, during, and after events. So Colin.
Yeah, thank you. We always say communication is the key to community building. So I just want to run through a lot of the tools that Meetup offers to get that conversation going. We did just launch the ability to toggle chat and comments on or off, so you can choose what communication tool you use for your event. This was a big request, so you can have both chat and comments on. You could have just one of them on, but you do have to have at least one on, and that encourages conversation so that you can actually talk to your attendees. And it's again, it's just on the event scheduler. Scroll down and you can choose which mode you prefer. Next slide, I'll just talk about chat. This is another one of our kind of new features. You can talk to people in real time before, during, and after the event. It's different from comments because comments are on the event homepage. Event chat brings you to a different page where it's like a instant messaging feature. You can also share photos, files, reactions to the messages. And we think it's helpful for finding each other at in-person events, and that's what we're talking about. You know, if someone's lost, like, hey, where are you? You can use event chat for that. You can also use direct messages, but you know, just to reemphasize, like, stay communicative with your attendees before, during, and after, because it really makes a difference. You don't want to leave anyone hanging, you know, or someone's lost and you weren't like, you didn't have notifications turned on or whatever. So this will hopefully help with that. Next, we have direct messages. Like I was just talking about, same idea, except this is just between two people. Their personal messages, private messages. You can remind your attendees about the event that's upcoming, thank them after the fact, communicate with them in real time. So that's always helpful. And the next one, discussions. This is a good one to kind of talk to your entire group. You post a discussion on your group homepage, and we find that it's helpful to you know, find ideas for venues, availability. If you want to post a poll there, to just like see what your members are interested in, and maybe they have ideas for venues that you can ask them about. Next is our contact members tool. So this is really email focused. The contact members tool also has a mailing list, so you can send a group-wide email to your members, or you can select a specific subset of members to send an email to. This is found, all these like settings are found in your optional settings page if you want to turn on the mailing list or turn it off. Mailing list is like you know, it's just like an email chain. And I think that's the last one.
That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah. We always like to take some time to talk about upcoming features. Colin, do you want to speak to this one real quick? I know it's been
Sure. Really quick, Paul, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, there were just some questions that people had about payment.
Oh yeah, we'll
We'll get to the Q&A after. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll answer
this-
the Q&A in
so
just 1
I
second.
guess we should let everyone. So for everyone who's posting about the Q&A, we're gonna we'll answer those later in the session.
Yeah, just momentarily. Yeah.
Yep.
And any last thoughts about the communication tools, and then we'll talk about the product updates, and then we'll get into the Q&A.
No last thoughts.
All right.
Cool. Yeah, so I just wanted to share this. Our product team has just launched a kickoff to start building hybrid events. And I know that this is a big request for a long time, and I'm really excited about this. And our PM, JT, he is working hard with our designers to kick this off. And the idea between hybrid events is you can choose, right now you can choose between in-person or online. A hybrid is both. So a lot of people, you know, maybe there's like a conference happening where there's speakers joining remotely, or there's members joining remotely, but then there's people in the auditorium in person. You know, so there's different use cases for this. This will be especially helpful for pro organizers. And you'll be able to add a online event link and an in-person venue. And then your members can choose how they will be joining, whether online or in person.
Cool. As always, we like to share this invitation to download the Meetup for Organizers app. It's a streamlined version of the Meetup app that's specific for organizers. It gives you easier and faster access to the tools for creating, managing, publishing, and editing events. If you scan the QR code, it'll bring you to a landing page where you can download either the Android or the iOS version of the app. I believe Emily usually shares the link for this as well. And that takes us to the highly requested and sought after, if the presentation will load, Q&A. There we are. Cool. We have been gathering some questions that we want to address over Q&A. I'll go ahead and start selecting some of them. We've got a list of them on the side that we've been gathering. The first question comes from Sterling. Sterling has asked, I'm looking for about 200 person event, a space to host about 200 people in Los Angeles, which feels personal and has social space. Are there any searchable catalogs of suitable venues in large cities that can help narrow down options? I'm not familiar with such a resource. I can see that that would be really useful in terms of this conversation. Anyone else? Paul, Michelle, Colin, anyone familiar with that kind of resource? I have a workaround in mind, but I'm just
for me, I mean, like what I look at is places I know that have a lot of space. Like I said, the value I can bring during non-busy hours when the time I plan to host a meetup. But then I've done things like Peer Space, where I know they're looking for bookers, but then I contact them. I say, see, you have a place. We're just a small group. We're not a for-profit business. We're not, we're just a meetup group. We can bring in customers, but we don't have a budget for a space. Or you can rent out a space like that, but when you go on a site like Peer Space, they tell you about the capacity.
What is the site?
Peer Space.
Is that PEER?
Yeah, PEER space. So that's like an Airbnb for booking event spaces. It's also used for things like weddings or film shoots, but they don't tell you the name of the business. Sometimes you can just figure it out on your own, reach to the venues directly rather than book on their site maybe, and you could just talk to them, have a gentleman's agreement hosting at your place during non-busy hours, depending on your budget. But that's where you do get the details about the amount of space they have and your capacity and open hours. I would say hotels are usually very good when it comes to space in Los Angeles, because hotels usually do have big bars or conference areas. I know a place in Los Angeles, 2-Bit Circus. They could fit a lot of people, but you definitely have to contact them in advance. But we should do that for every venue. And yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think doing that research at contacting the venues probably before each event, just to reset, even if it's a venue that you are familiar with and that you've worked with before, just a quick touch base to say like, hey, it's us again, probably behooves everyone involved. The Peer Space is cool. I hadn't heard of that before. I'm glad you brought that up. Michelle, did you have thoughts about like a catalog of resources for finding venues?
Well, I look at Meetup as something that could, a platform that could help me build community. And when community is involved, I always think of a community center, because they may be interested in bringing more people there. So community center, or a religious, a church or a synagogue that may have space that during the week they're not using it, and they may want to be more visible to the community. So me bringing in a group of people where now this venue is visible to them, I am helping them build community while they're helping me build community. So
that's that's a really clever idea too. I also wanted to call out too, like you were saying, like, because of the event today, you're thinking about hosting an event at museums, and I wanted to reemphasize, like, ask your attendees, like ask your group members. Like, you never know who in your group has ideas that they want to volunteer, who, like, if somebody's got a brother or a friend or a relative or anything, like you never know who's got the connection who can find the next space for you. Sorry to pull this along,
but
I want to make sure.
Mention in the description, before I've used placeholders to say that this is when we want to do it. We're looking for a date, and then put in the bottom, if you have a recommendation, please contact me. With the space. Don't be afraid to be obvious about it, but don't do it in a way where you look unprepared, but do it in a way that you want to let people know that you want suggestions, and even putting it in the description.
Great. I'm sorry to keep us rushing along here, but we want to make sure that we address a couple more questions, and then we want to share the resources we talked about. The next question comes from Peter, who asks, for a group's regular Zoom events, do you suggest using the same Zoom code for each event or using a new Zoom code for each event? I think that's a good question from a security standpoint. Do either of you have experience making that decision?
I do. Sorry, I'll just jump in
Yeah,
because
go for
I
it.
have a reoccurring event from Monday through Thursday, and I do use the same Zoom link. With that said, that could be problematic if someone infiltrates my meeting and then somehow copies and pastes it for the future. I haven't really experienced that, but it's like in the back of my mind. So it really comes down to what you're comfortable with. I've found that I don't really get that many Zoom bombers at all, but the few times it's happened, it's a little traumatic. And so I have changed the Zoom link after I'm Zoom bombed, just to make sure. But I still continue to have the same link every day until something goes wrong.
Yeah.
You can do that in the event scheduler though, by creating, if you have a reoccurring event, you can create a, like, for example, like if you have a reoccurring event Monday through Thursday, you create an event for Monday and make it repeat every Monday and have a Zoom link for that. Create an event for Tuesday, have a Zoom link, different Zoom link for Tuesday and reoccur. So I hope that makes sense, but that's another alternative that I've considered. But I'm okay for now just having the same link.
I think that is like a, I mean, we talked about in terms of reaching out to venues and communicating with them about needs, that it's not going to be a cookie cutter approach. I think all of these strategies, it ends up being that. It's like, it's not always, it's not necessarily always better to change up your Zoom link. It's not always necessarily better to keep the same one. It's going to vary from community to community based on the needs that you're encountering. So it's worth trying both things. I think we got time for one last question. And this one comes from Peter, who asks, can the panelists talk about whether or not it's worth it to post signs at your venue? I have an ongoing argument with my co-organizers about this in our discussion group. They think it's not worth the trouble, but I think it puts newcomers at ease in a room or in a building where they've never been before. I know, Paul, you said you work with venues that'll sometimes put those signs up themselves. Either of you, want to speak to whether or not you think it's worth having signs up?
Well, we want people to be able to find it. The main thing is, as long as they know where to find the group, and to make sure that the venue can say that we can even block off an area specifically for your group. Because there's nothing worse than when you have people confused. Am I in the right place? Or you're not, or they're talking to somebody. Wait, you're in this group? I thought this is for that. There's nothing worse than when that happens. So you should definitely have signs, but even go further and ask the venue to make sure that you have a blocked off area just for your group.
Nice. Cool. Any last thoughts on that, Michelle, on having signs up?
I didn't find that necessary because I plan to wear the t-shirt. I think that's a little bit more warmer to have the t-shirt on. Kind of a sign is nice maybe if you're sitting at a table and like you're like the only one, but if you're like in a hotel lobby or in the park sitting there with a sign, probably is not going to look good. So then the t-shirt, it looks nice.
I think it serves a similar purpose to the sign, but like you're saying, it's a little bit more of a personal touch. So it's great. Thank you both so much. I really appreciate your anecdotes, your experiences, the strategies you're sharing. And like I said at the beginning, like I know venues are such like a crucial part of the community building experience. So really appreciate your time today. Last but not least, as we always do, we like to finish up these events by offering up some links so that everyone who's joined us today has access to our community support team. If we didn't get a chance to answer your questions that you posted in the Q&A, we have all kinds of resources that are designed to address them or to provide more personal support. So we want to make sure that you've got access to our product feature request form. This is a hugely useful resource for you as users of Meetup to make requests about where Meetup goes next. The feature that we saw earlier in the presentation about choosing between chat or comments came directly out of feedback and requests we were getting from people using Meetup. By scanning that QR code or visiting the link that Emily has posted, you yourself can then register if you see a piece of Meetup that just like isn't quite working the way you want it to, or just a piece of Meetup that hasn't even been built yet that you think would be really, really useful for your group. Please submit those requests so our engineers can take a look. If you don't have specific requests, but you just want to stay up to date on what's new and what's coming out next, our product updates page on our blog will make those updates every so often. Meetup's Help Center is the repository for all of the information about how to navigate and how to work around some common issues that we're aware people might run into. At the bottom of every page is a link that says need help. So if you're not finding the answer you're looking for on a specific article, you click that link at the bottom of the page and you can access the email forms. You can contact our community support team, create an email ticket, and a specialist will work directly with you on an account specific level. Last but not least, if something has gone wrong while you were using Meetup, you've encountered an error message or the app has crashed, something technically doesn't seem to be working right, please submit an error or a bug request. That's this last QR code on the bottom right, the last link that we're sharing. By reporting bugs through this specific form, instead of just creating a general support ticket, we can track those errors a lot more efficiently. We can investigate and we can solve them even faster so that you can get back to building your community. The final thing we want to share is the organizer community on Discord. This is a resource we've been building over the last year or so. We have a team of organizer mentors who answer questions very similarly to how Paul and Michelle did today. We also just have thousands of organizers who have joined this Discord community to share their questions and to share their experiences. Everyone is benefiting from each other's knowledge and the things that everybody is trying. We're really proud of how this is growing, and we'd love to have organizers like yourself join it. So feel free to scan the QR code or join in the links below. And that is our time today. Thank you again so much to Paul and Michelle for joining us and talking about venue selection today, and happy community building to you all. Thank you again.